Yo, what's going on, APUSH people? We have Key Concept 5.1 for you today. This is part of Period 5, which goes from 1844 to 1877. I will cover everything you need to know about Key Concept 5.1 to succeed in APUSH. Please make sure you check out the description below with other videos I've made that relate to this section. Before we go on, I want to give a huge shout out to Ms. Scott and her 145 APUSH students in Fort Worth, Texas. I understand you all watch my videos. You use them in class. I really appreciate your support. Thank you so much. Best of luck to you all this year. Ms. Scott tells me you are doing some wonderful big things in class, and best of luck to you. So thank you again for your support. It means a lot to me. All right, let's read Key Concept 5.1. It says, the United States became more connected with the world as it pursued an expansionist foreign policy in the Western Hemisphere and emerged as the destination for many migrants from other countries. And that's from page 54 of the curriculum framework. If you want a copy of it, check out the description below. All right, it's a big idea questions to focus on as we go through here. What were the social, economic, and political impacts of Manifest Destiny and westward expansion? What impact did the Mexican-American War have on politics? And what were reasons for and the goals of the Nativist movement that emerges during this time that relates to the migrants coming from other countries? All right, Key Concept 5.1, Roman numeral 1, enthusiasm for U.S. territorial expansion fueled by economic and national security interests and supported by claims of U.S. racial and cultural superiority resulted in war, opening of new markets, acquisition of new territory, and increased ideological conflicts. All right, so let's talk about Manifest Destiny and political debates. Manifest Destiny is the belief that it was America's God-given right to expand westward, specifically from the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific Ocean. We see that the U.S. increases its power in the Western Hemisphere significantly during this time. Here's a very famous painting you should absolutely be familiar with, and this pretty much depicts Manifest Destiny. We have here religious representation, this woman floating across west. Notice she's moving to the left or the west, and she's coming from the east, and this is the United States expanding. Now she is stringing telegraph lines as she goes, and notice that in the far right, the east, are a bunch of trains, and we'll see different forms of transportation going out west. And we have Native Americans down here that are running and looking backwards as the white Americans are moving out west. And we have people that are doing farm work too down here in the lower right-hand portion of this. Very important painting you should definitely be familiar with. This also helped promote nationalism and a belief of superiority, the idea of Manifest Destiny. And it absolutely shaped the era's political debates. This was probably the number one political debate of the 1840s and 1850s. We see this in the election of 1844, specifically with the issue of Texas. And this ultimately cost Henry Clay the election in 1844 because he was flip-flopping on Texas. And James K. Polk was 100% for the acquisition of Texas and Manifest Destiny. So let's go to the Mexican-American War, and I do have a video on that. Check it out in the description below. What were the impacts of this? Well, there's debates over slavery. We see this with this proviso, the Wilmot proviso by this guy, David Wilmot, who wrote a bill that said all land gained from Mexico should be slave-free, and that creates lots of tension. And the Free Soil Party develops during this time, and they have the same ideas. All land acquired from Mexico should be free of slaves. The Compromise of 1850 we'll get to in the next key concept, but what this does is it helps determine how newly acquired land from the Mexican-American War would enter the Union, and they try to solve the issue with popular sovereignty, or allowing the people in the territories to vote. So absolutely, definitely know the impacts of the Mexican-American War. All right, so what are the impacts of westward expansion? Well, we have enormous environmental transformation. In the 1870s, we see the decline of the buffalo, or bison. At one point, there's less than 200 in North America. We also see the removing of grass to plant different crops led to the erosion of soil, and that helped alter the landscape. And we have new economic activities, specifically railroad construction, and cities would be built around railroads. We would see this happen quite often. Mining also helped transform the environmental landscape, and it was also a new economic opportunity, particularly Comstock Lode in Nevada. Comstock Lode was an area where there was an incredible amount of silver, and we'll see that settlements are built around resources, as you can see in this picture there. Increased settlement occurred especially on former native land. We'll see, sadly, for Native Americans, they are pushed further and further west and further off their own lands. And the U.S. began to look to trade beyond its own borders as well, especially in Asia with the large populations in Asia. Economic initiatives, things like clipper ships, which allowed for faster travel, this helped increase trade with China, especially tea in the 1840s and 1850s. Diplomatic initiatives, including Matthew Perry and the opening of Japan in the 1850s when he traveled over to Japan and began to trade with them. And cultural initiatives as well. Missionaries in China helped spread Christianity. So the U.S. is definitely expanding beyond its own borders, especially in Asia. Know that. All right, key concept 5.1 Roman numeral 2 says westward expansion, migration to and within the United States, and the end of slavery reshaped North American boundaries and caused conflicts over American cultural identities, citizenship, and the question of extending and protecting rights for various groups of U.S. inhabitants. So increased immigration prior to the Civil War, this is called old immigration, and old immigrants tended to come from Northern and Western Europe, especially Irish, and Germans and some British too. They would settle in communities together, and they often kept their religions, languages, and customs. The Irish tended to settle in cities in the Northeast, and they were mostly Catholic. They would work for lower wages, and this would lead to resentment by American-born workers. Germans tended to be farmers and settle on what then was the frontier in places like Ohio. And parochial schools were established, which caused resentment from American-born individuals, and parochial schools were Catholic schools, and a lot of Irish would develop, and a lot of Irish would go to parochial schools. And there's this huge fear with Catholics that the Pope would be in control of America. This is really fear throughout the 19th and 20th century as well. So what's the impact of immigration? Well, we have the emergence of a nativist movement. Nativism is the dislike or hatred of foreigners, and they sought to stop immigration. The nativists did. The Know Nothing Party emerges, which was a very popular political party during the 1840s and 1850s, and they were anti-immigrant and anti-Catholic, and they wanted to stop immigration. And you see in this picture here, this is the 13th president of the United States, Millard Fillmore, running with Andrew Jackson's nephew as his vice president candidate for a presidential election. And many Americans resented the Irish and Germans because they tended to vote Democratic. All right, new economic opportunities and religious refuge were available out west for Asians, African Americans, and whites. In the 1840s, we have the gold rush in California, and cities are literally growing in population overnight. People are moving out west trying to make more money. The Mormons sought refuge in Utah, and you have cattle ranching in the Dakotas as well. Many people are moving out to the Great Plains and out west to try to make more money, including Teddy Roosevelt in his 20s. He moved to the Dakotas and became a cattle rancher. The federal government, both during and after the Civil War, helped promote economic development and westward expansion. Absolutely know this. An example of this is the Homestead Act, and this was passed in 1862. And it gave 160 acres of land that would be given for a small fee or even sometimes free to anyone that moved west and promised to improve the land over a 5-year time period. And here's an example of a family that moved down, and here's a house that they built. The state and the federal governments often gave subsidies or money and land to railroad companies to build railroads. So the federal government is encouraging westward migration to railroad companies. And the U.S. expansion led to conflict with natives and Hispanics, those that were living in the land formerly belonging to Mexico. Remember, after this Mexican-American War, the U.S. gains a lot of land, and those Mexicans are now incorporated into the United States. And oftentimes their lives, the natives and Hispanics, their lives would be changed. With the Sand Creek Massacre, which occurred in November of 1864, a Colorado militia attacked the Cheyenne Indians. They killed over 100 of them, mostly women and children. That's just one of several examples of Native Americans being killed during this time. The Battle of Little Bighorn, which is also known as Custer's Last Stand, was when Native Americans attacked and killed Lieutenant Colonel Custer and all of his men, and this led to more fighting between the two groups. And the U.S. sought to assimilate or bring in many natives into American culture with the expectation that they would adopt white ways, including speaking English, dressing as Americans, and also Christianity as well. Then we have Mariano Vallejo. He was Mexican born, but he helped the transition of California from belonging to Mexico to becoming a state in the United States. He played an instrumental role in that. All right, let's go over some test tips for you for multiple choice and short answer. Absolutely know the impacts of the Mexican-American War. Be able to identify what nativism is and characteristics of immigrants during this time. And be familiar with a couple different economic opportunities out west that were available during this time, both by the government and by individuals seeking more money. Essay questions could be about manifest destiny and its impacts, whether it's on Native Americans, slavery, the Civil War. How did the government contribute to settlement out west? Know that with the Homestead Act, and know they gave subsidies to railroad companies. All right, guys, thank you very much for watching. I'm going to ask you, if you haven't already, please take a moment to subscribe to my channel. Help me spread the word. If you found this video helpful, please let somebody else know about it. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in this comment section below. And here is the original Matthew Perry, not the dude from Friends. Here's the original one that traveled to Japan in 1854. Imagine this guy being on Friends, huh? All right, thank you very much for watching. I look forward to seeing you right back here for Key Concept 5.2. Have a good day.